Hey everyone, Nat Richards from Techs on the Move here, and I'm talking now about where people might find accommodation options when they arrive in Australia starting their new life down under. So fundamentally, where am I going to live? This is a big topic to try to cover off in a short video, so I'll keep it as brief as possible, but fair warning to you, this is probably going to ramble on a little bit. Hopefully though, some of the things that I discuss here might give you a little bit more confidence in what to expect if all of this comes off, maybe give you some ideas on how you can manage this process for you, because of course, everyone's situation is different, people have got their own preferences, and there's no one correct way to try to line up lasting accommodation in Australia. So here goes nothing. First and foremost, if you're using our help to find work in Australia, no matter whether you're a motor mechanic, diesel mechanic, panel beater, an auto electrician, whatever you might be, at the end of the day, most of the employers that we work with will likely offer some form of upfront accommodation as soon as you land. So that will be a short period, of course, it's not going to last forever. Typically, I would expect it's probably not going to be much more than 2 weeks, and 1 week is fairly common. That is not a lot of time, of course, so I'm not suggesting that this has you sorted for any particularly long period of time, but ultimately what we've found is that even within the first week, it can be great just to take the initial stress off where you're going to stay as soon as you get off a plane, and then through that first week, you can sleep off your jet lag and hopefully put in place whatever plans you've probably started for your own longer term accommodation before you left your home country. So we'll touch on that a little bit more in a minute, but that first week of just basic accommodation can definitely help, and if you get a little bit longer than that, awesome. We'll need to figure that out together though when things start to shape right up through the job seeking process. So that's kind of observation number one, and behind that of course is getting from the airport to wherever you're likely to stay. We always advocate that employers all around the country should go and pick someone up wherever possible, so unless you're getting in at a particularly horrible time of night or on a day of the year where it can be really difficult, like I recently had a guy arrive on New Year's Day. That made life tricky for him, but ultimately we always say that an employer really should consider going out to the airport and picking up their newly arrived person, because it's a great way to establish a connection straight up, and we're known to do that an awful lot in Sydney, in New South Wales, if you're landing within our vicinity. So from there, from that first initial accommodation that you might get hold of, or something that perhaps you book for yourself just as though you were on holiday if necessary, I think probably the options are going to diversify a hell of a lot depending on what sort of person or family you might be and what your needs are. So if you're a single person, or perhaps even a young couple who isn't too offended by this idea, then living with other people can, I think, be a really great way to start off your journey in Australia for a couple of key reasons. Point number one, the obvious one, is that it's quite cost effective. So without taking on the cost of a full rent for yourself, you're definitely going to find that balancing the budget and having a little cash left over to have some fun in Australia is going to be a bit easier. But point number two, which I think is probably more important, certainly to making sure that you find your feet, is the social aspect of it. So moving to Australia it's not putting you in the land of milk and honey. Everything isn't going to be perfect. There's going to be difficult times for sure. You're going to get homesick. You're probably going to find that work is still work, just like it was at home. So after the sheen of everything being new and interesting in Australia wears off, you're probably going to find that you go through a little bit of a dip and things aren't looking so great. And at that point in particular, I think it's great if you've got someone else that you're living with. Doesn't have to be your best friend, but someone that you know a little bit, where you can come home and say, you know what, today sucked, or this week sucked, or I really miss my family back home, or whatever. Vent the things that are challenging you, talk to someone about it that isn't just a work colleague, and of course that can be a great way to also branch out your social network. So through someone that you're living with, you probably meet other people that they know. You can start to form your own little community around you at home rather than just at work, and it makes you feel a little bit more settled. So that's more of a popular method of finding accommodation, of course, for someone who is coming alone, or perhaps a young couple who isn't averse to living with someone else in the same sort of situation. So really powerful websites these days can help deliver that stuff ahead of time. So flatmates.com.au is a real favourite of mine. I've had tons of people successfully use that, and ultimately you can start looking for great options on Flatmates or other platforms that work in a similar way before you even leave your own country. So if you've got an arrival date, you can touch base with people over here, find the sort of accommodation that might work for you, perhaps even chat to whoever's taking care of that on this end, try to form a relationship and make the process quite smooth and easy from there. So you may be able to inspect a place even by video, or you may be able to do that as soon as you land and get into your temporary accommodation. So that's that side of things. If you're thinking more of living independently, though, of course, then rental is probably the option for the vast majority of people. And again, websites are there to deliver that, of course, just as they are for shared accommodation. So realestate.com.au or domain.com.au are two very popular platforms for finding rentals. The rental situation is very similar to what you probably know from your home country. So getting a rental property lined up is going to take basic forms of identification, perhaps also things like a copy of your visa and perhaps even a contract of employment, which of course will go hand in hand with the visa. So real estate agents or private leases may need to see that evidence that everything is quite settled for you financially before they'll move ahead, but it's not usually a big concern. And the other sorts of documentation that you might need to carry to get a rental property are really no different to what you would expect in your home country. So that shouldn't be too much of a challenge. And of course, in just the same way, before you ever leave your home country, you can reach out when you've got a set arrival date to let people know that you're looking and you'd like to inspect properties and hopefully move forward with that quite quickly. You'll be surprised at how well that can flow. But I'm well aware that it may not always go perfectly according to plan, and you may not be able to move out from your initial accommodation into a rental property straight away. Even if you find something that works really well, we sign a lease and everything's looking fantastic, you might have a couple of weeks before you can actually move in. So you're kind of left in this limbo land. And that's where I found that people are often really using something like Airbnb to its full potential there. So Airbnb, depending on the area you're in, of course, you probably find that you can get a perfectly livable and comfortable solution there for a couple of weeks, really short period of time, where you'll have things like kitchens and laundries and all the stuff you need to get on with regular day-to-day life when you've already started working. And it shouldn't cost you a bomb. It's probably going to cost you about what rent would anyway, so you're not really going backwards. It's not like living in a hotel where it'll cost you a fortune and you go without the basic necessities of daily life. We don't want you eating McDonald's every night. So that's that side of things, and certainly I'd imagine that's more important for families than anyone else, because that way you can be sure that you can have a roof over the heads of your kids. On that, families coming across, I often get hit with the question, can one of the parents, usually of course the father in our situation, given that the overwhelming majority of people we help are men, can they come across before the rest of their families, maybe set up a family home and try to get some key things in place so that the transition can be easy for the rest of the tribe? And the answer there is absolutely yes as well. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. It really comes down to what will work as a balance for the whole family and where you're most comfortable, but we can talk about that one-on-one. Otherwise, a couple of other really base key notes. People often ask, can I buy property? The answer is absolutely yes, though that's a bit more complicated. It comes down to what visa you're on and what sort of taxation you're prepared to pay and what you aren't. So yes, you can buy property, but it's a little bit tricky. And whereabouts am I going to find suitable places to get my head around the prospect of renting for the most part in Australia? It's difficult to do without knowing where you're going to live, of course, but through consultation, if we're chatting, you've got an idea on a particular location that you'd like to be, I'd be more than happy to suggest a couple of suburbs or areas within a particular location that you might think are good examples of what might be available in general, to give you a bit of a feel. So that, again, we can figure out when talking. So hopefully all of that makes sense. A few of you hopefully have made it to the end of this video. If you've got any questions, by all means, throw them in the comments wherever you've seen this and we'll try to get back to you. Otherwise, of course, you can reach out to me anytime you like directly at nat.richards@texonthemove.com.au. Would love to hear from you anytime you're interested in talking about accommodation in Australia or anything else. See you next time.